When my nasty coworker gave my cell number to my mother that I was trying to cut out of my life. I spoke before in detail about my mother. Just know she's an extremely awful person I'm glad I have nothing to do with anymore. But this is about Ted. A coworker I used to have when I was in college and working part-time in a warehouse. Unlike me, Ted was a full-time employee. But he didn't act like it. We were about the same age though. Ted was a snoop. He loved gossip, and he loved to look for things. Ted also spent long periods in the bathroom listening to his MP3 just to avoid working. The first time he got written up was for bringing XXX material to work and reading it out in the open while on break. He called it BS and said our manager was a prude. But no one else sided with him about it. The second time Ted got written up, it was because he gave my cell phone number to my mother. She called my job pretending to be my girlfriend, and Ted gave her the number without question. How did he get it? All employees had their numbers written down by the manager. Most of the employees were part-timers like me. And employee turnover rates were high. So the manager had all our numbers written down at the ready to call someone in to take over a shift when needed. Which was surprisingly often. I wouldn't call the manager an unpleasant guy. But he kept everyone at arm's length. Anyway, Ted gave my mother my first cell phone number. And she immediately used it to start calling and harassing me. Oh, he got in trouble for it when I complained to the boss, because it was in the rules you're not allowed to give out any personal information of your coworkers. Ted actually blamed the write-up he got for it on me, and claimed I should have warned him. I pointed out that if I had a girlfriend, then she'd already have my number. She wouldn't need to ask a stranger for it. Ted gave me attitude and stopped talking with me at all after that. Ted got fired a few months later after being caught snooping in the manager's office again, which he'd been forbidden from entering. He made a big show of yelling "Screw you! Screw this job," when he grabbed his backpack and ran out. I saw him again about a year later in the area working for a landscaping service. I rode by on my bike and slowed down when I saw him working a lawnmower. He didn't seem to recognize me, but I recognized him. Entitled neighbor thinks he can wander into my back garden when he wants. Going to try and set the scene a bit here. My house backs onto a number of flats. I have a little terrace/garden out the back that is linked to my property. Below that terrace is a small patio area that is linked to the flats, which they can get access to by their own back door. There are then steps up to my area, which are gated off. I also have a locked gate that allows access to the terrace/garden because I live on a main road. A few months ago the flat behind me had a problem with their plumbing, and the drain behind was overflowing with literal shit. Obviously an extremely nasty situation for everybody. When the owner of the flats, we will call him T, asked if he could come round the back and check the drain, of course we said yes because we're not total assholes. After he checked the drain, he said he'd need somebody to come out, check it and drain it. We agreed but made it clear we would need to be made aware before it happened as stipulated in our rental agreement with the letting agent. He said fine, and we got notice before any work was done so we could ensure our gate was unlocked. I thought that was the end of it, and boy was I wrong. A few weeks later, I was at home and heard my front gate open. I found it odd because my boyfriend wasn't due home from work for a little while and nobody knocked on the door. The door to my house is immediately next to the gate, so it's seconds between the gate opening and a knock. When the gate went a second time, I looked outside to find T walking away. Obviously he had entered my property without my consent. Wanting to give him the benefit of the doubt, believing that he just wanted to check the drain one last time, I didn't say anything about it. Just letting it slide. A couple of days later, my boyfriend, who had given him his number to deal with the drain issue, got a phone call from him saying he needed to gain access to the back of our property and why did we have our gate locked. As my boyfriend said, we were both at work and neither could come home to deal with his request, and if he needed something to speak to the letting agents. He just hung up. I spoke to my boyfriend and we collectively came to the decision that we would keep the gate locked at all times, even when we were in, because I didn't feel comfortable him just walking into my property as and when he felt like it. And he did not like that. The next time he tried to get in, my boyfriend was at home and I was at work. When he opened the gate, he got a stream of abuse from T, asking why we had locked the gate when he had permission to have access to the back when he wants, and there is a note in our rental agreement to state this. He threatened to get solicitors on us if we didn't leave the gate open or give him a key to get in when he wanted. It was here, he said, because he had renovated the house he deserved to gain access on his terms, even though he wasn't our landlord. My boyfriend just told him to take it up with the letting agent if there was a problem and shut the door on his face. When I got home, I combed through my rental agreement and there was no such note in place. The only thing I could find about access was we required 24 hours notice for any work or access to the property, including the garden, unless it was urgent and they required access sooner. But they still had to provide detail in writing about any work that would be done even within 24 hours. Because of this, I told the letting agent, who had communication with T, that he would have to ask for access to my garden via them and I require the written notice as stipulated in my contract. They agreed to pass the message on. Things cooled a bit, but the problem with the drain started again. We could see it was overflowing and apparently T was aware. But we hadn't heard anything from him or the letting agent about when somebody would come and deal with it. This was when I got my own back. I'm probably a bad person for this, but at this stage I had enough. T turned up with the drainage company on a day that I was at home unwell. I was lying on the sofa when I heard a van pull up and somebody try to open the gate. But of course it was locked. The bell went and I considered getting up and answering the door, but when I heard T's voice I decided I wasn't going to feed his entitlement. I just lay back down, stuck my earplugs in and tried to go back to sleep. For the next 30 or so minutes he tried to get in. Constantly ringing the bell, knocking loudly on my window, shouting into the house, screaming at what I can only assume was my boyfriend on the phone. But I ignored it all. Eventually he got the message and left. When my boyfriend came home from work, he came back to give us a verbal dressing down, threatening legal action again, etc., because he needed access to the property and we didn't provide it. I pointed out that neither of us were in when he turned up, my blinds were shut and nobody can see in, so he didn't know I was off sick, and he didn't give us the agreed notice that he would require access, and in the future I will no longer be dealing with him. If he wants access, to go through the letting agent, and the next time I find him in my garden I'm ringing the police for trespassing. He was still threatening me, so I told him to go for it because I get free legal advice due to a membership I had, and if he really wants to go down that route, be my guest. I've honestly never seen somebody shut up so quickly. He said he'd go through the letting agent in the future and I said good choice and shut the door in his face. After that he solely dealt with the letting agent and followed all instructions once he knew I had access to free legal advice. The best part about this whole incident was, he could have checked the drain from his own property and never needed access to my garden. He just wanted to flex his muscles and thought he could bully us because we're a young couple. Story 3. Who's entitled here? Me or them? If anyone is kind enough to read this and give me your opinion, I'd appreciate it. I'll do my best to present the facts. Lived in current house about 7.5 years. Neighbors on one side added a garage to backyard, there was already an attached garage, so added a driveway going right next to the house all the way up to about 2 inches from property line. This all happened before us. Previous owners didn't like view of driveway, so planted a 75-foot row of arborvitae. Fast forward to last week, I look out and the neighbor has cut the entire backside off of one of the arborvitae, the biggest, most crucial one to providing privacy between our patio and their back door area. There is now a giant hole in a 20-year-old, 20-foot-tall tree. I run out, practically crying, asking, "What are you doing?" The guy says, he's sorry, didn't mean to cut so much, and that he'll pay for half a new tree if I want one. I told him I was very upset and I'd get back to him. Every cut he made was well onto my side of the property. He admits as much, but says he crossed the line so as to make clean cuts. Anyway, replacing such a mature tree is astronomically expensive, and I'm guessing he means to split the cost of a baby one. I'm also not sure a new one would do well since there are other large arborvitae on either side. So, I figure the best way to get the privacy back and to keep my tree off his driveway is to add a few fence panels. I let him know what I was thinking, that I'd pay for it, etc. He comes back at me saying we cannot put a fence next to the property line because their car doors will hit it, as his driveway is only 10 feet wide. He wants us to come up with a solution we both like. Remember, I'm only proposing this because he cut my tree. Plus it would only be about 25 feet of fencing on 125-foot driveway. I don't want a neighbor war here, but I don't know what to do. I'm surprised a neighbor would expect us to keep clear part of our property for their use. Am I wrong? I'm worried he may deny us access to his driveway if we try to install a fence, though, so I feel boxed in. With the trees there, I imagine the installers would need to be on their property for part of the install. Am I missing something? I know we're all biased towards our own ends, but I really am trying to be fair. Like and subscribe for daily Reddit story uploads.